Great, cool. So am I allowed to drive now?
You're allowed to drive all you want.
I've got the keys. I've got the keys of the car. Cool, awesome. Right, we have so much that we need to cover, but first I would love to introduce our very, very esteemed guest. I've been genuinely very excited about this because these two know a ton about DevSecOps. And I want to pick their brain from a completely sort of ignorant outsider's point of view here. So first off, we've got DJ, who's the Vice President of Infrastructure and Developer Operations at VillageMD. And we've got Sonya, who's the Principal Security Engineer at Photobox. Say hi, everyone.
Hey, what's going on, Waleed? Nice to meet you and see you today. And Sonya, nice to be here with you too.
Hey, hi, everyone.
Hey, Sonya. Hey, DJ. How's it going? Cool. I am so excited. We have so much to tuck into, so I'm going to dive right in. I've also had a lot of coffee, so please bear with me. So I wanted to just sort of start off by giving myself and the audience a bit more of an understanding as to sort of what your existing experiences with DevSecOps first. I'll throw it to you first, DJ, and then we'll head to you, Sonya.
Oh man, it's been at least 6 years, if not more, I think. I remember talking about DevSecOps back at RSA. This is like early 2017, and I'd been doing it at Aetna CVS, and it was just adding security to DevOps, and we really wanted to call out the sec inside of DevOps, and it was interesting because the first time I spoke about it was at a DevOps Connect conference, and I remember Mark Willis, one of the granddaddies of DevOps, saying to me, you got a lot of nerve, in so many words, talking about security at a DevOps conference. What's going on here? I'm like, well, we're at RSA. It's sort of a security place. So it was sort of the genesis for me of this sort of calm before the storm of security and DevOps, and then the shifting left part of security as well.
That's awesome. I mean, I'd love to sort of think of you as someone who's bringing like wearing a white dress to a wedding when you're a participant, kind of thing, of like bringing sec to a DevOps event. So Sonya, tell me about your experiences and like your current setup and everything with DevSecOps.
Sure. So I've been in the DevSecOps ecosystem commercially at my two workplaces, but also I've been trying to implement security in DevOps in open source. So this is something that I have to the bottom of my heart that's really important for me. So I try to work on open source projects and just trying to implement security within their CI/CD pipeline. And this could be just implementing best security practices. So for example, if you're hosting a project on GitHub, is using the tools that you have on the GitHub marketplace and to have, for example, a single source of truth within your pull requests where you would have all the tools, so security, compliance, flagging secrets, telling you the health of your dependency packages, all of those. So really easy setup that you could also implement not only on the commercial business organization, but also on the open source project, because we're also using open source projects. So this matter.
So that's fascinating because I mean I might be wrong here, DJ and Sonya. I mean, Sonya, it sounded like you trying to integrate security and sort of the DevOps process seemed to be a pretty not smooth sailing, but I imagine sort of largely smooth-ish atmosphere. While DJ, I imagine you trying to bring it into the space may have just been seen with intrepid hesitation. So is that correct, Sonya, or do you feel like there was some difficulty in also adding the sec in there too?
It's always challenging to implement security within DevOps because you need to have that education piece and buy-in from the developers. So it's always important to have from start onboarding the developers and to explain why you're implementing those tools or where you're doing those processes and workflows. And then since you have that onboarding and buying from the developers, I guess it's easier for them to, at the end, use the tools. But usually what I do, should it be commercially or for open source, is I attend their forums. So should they have like guilds or those kind of forums that they would have within an organization, and just to talk about real cases. So for example, if we take a product that will scan secrets, credentials within your code base, just to explain a real case scenario, what happened at, I don't know, at Starbucks or Uber, because they've already had those kind of issues. So this is what could happen potentially to your business. And when then the developer have a real life example, it's easier actually for them to understand instead of just having security jargons and acronyms, because we're really good at this, having a lot of jargons and acronyms and abbreviations, which probably doesn't make sense to developers. So keep it simple, give real life example, just onboard them, and take them along when you implement the tools. Give them access to the tools from the start. Don't wait at the end of the pipeline. Just, this is the tool. Yeah, that's all. Use it now.
That sounds like a pretty slam dunk approach to it. Like, it does sound, I mean, because obviously, like, DevOps is a cultural thing. Devsecops is a cultural thing. Like, DJ, did you see this sort of adoption or almost ease of adoption in terms of trying to get your developers or teams around your organization adopting Devsecops? Like, did you have a similar experience as Sonya, or were there more scars involved?
You know, I've been involved with like rolling out DevSecOps programs like for Fortune 10 healthcare companies, and you know, lately I've sort of tried to steer away from the term DevSecOps just because, you know, the definition of it is everyone's responsible for security, like sort of the high level definition, and if that's the case, it sort of invalidates its own existence. So, you know, trying to build security into DevOps as an attribute of quality, right? So if we go back to like lean manufacturing concepts and Edwards Deming and all of these kind of, you know, conceptual look at a pipeline as, you know, a series or an assembly line type of idea. You know, we add high mounted brake lights into a car. We don't have a separate assembly line for it. It's just part of what you do, right? So if we can make security almost invisible, developers are going to be more apt to use it. And then the quality aspect, you know, I look at security just like I would a test case or a regression test. You know, we have all this technology now. And again, it's like a lot of the DevSecOps tools are, you know, just recently coming. You know, we saw DevOps tools take about 10 years to actually mature and get to the point where they're actually useful. And now DevSecOps tools are starting to get in there. So like, you know, for example, software composition analysis or, you know, static analysis tools, but, you know, putting them in as just part of a pull request, it's right in front of the developers' faces. And they can't ignore it, right? And then you can apply policies and that kind of thing. But I think the hardest part of it was using slow tools at the beginning of this, where people would just take them out of the pipeline and not tell you. The siloing of DevSecOps, which is, you know, sort of a security organization type of thing, versus engineering, which is DevOps, like it ended up coming into two different silos in some of the places I've been at. And that's what I've spent the last 6 months trying to do, is just break that down, combine it into DevOps, and just call it a day. So taking folks from multiple teams. But, you know, the biggest challenge is again, having people treat security as an element of quality and just something that we don't have to do, we need to do. You know, we're in this age where the supply chain's messed up, you know, coding is just all over the place, and we're just trying to get rid of bad practices that, you know, technical debt bad practices that we've had over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple of talks so far within DevSecCon in EMEA and in APJ on sort of supply chain attacks and the emergence of that being a really, really pivotal part of the industry right now. And it's interesting to hear you say, for example, that, you know, you're trying to break down these barriers of like there being a silo of DevSecOps and a DevOps one as well, and you're trying to get them to mesh together. But then, do you not feel like the people who feel like they've accomplished a DevSecOps way of working sort of feel like they've worked at it? You know, I remember seeing companies when they achieved a sort of more fluid DevOps way of working, they were like, yeah, we nailed it, cool. Do you feel like it's important to still keep it, not necessarily in your blind spot or anything like that, but just like keep people aware of it, that you are actively still practicing security as your regular dev cycle?
You know, that again, I look at it as an attribute of quality, right? And also, you know, we have security organizations, you know, our GRC teams, for example, and compliance and our SOC. And, you know, when we start implementing all these things together, the problem that I found is, you know, if a security organization takes their AppSec team and makes it DevSecOps, and then you have DevOps over here in engineering, who makes the change? Who updates the pipeline? You know, who's responsible and who's accountable for the tool sets you use? Who manages the vendor relationships? Who takes the SBOMs out of what the vendors are giving and give it to our, you know, compliance and security review teams to look for third-party risk, you know, from that third party and all the dependencies along. So it gets very confusing of who's responsible for what, because really we've grown these 2 different organizations. Like if we just have one and we call it Devsecops, great. You know, call it Rainbow Monkey, Unicorn Pony. It doesn't really matter. But just have one team responsible for all of it. You know, when you start growing these large enterprises and you go from the startup stage all the way to, you know, this enterprise type of, you know, deployment, man, it's just easier to have that silo taken out. So you don't have to have going up the management chain and over and down to get anything done. It really depends really on what, you know, again, this is an opinion and this is what I've seen and sort of where I'm going with VillageMD, but you know, each organization is different in how they organize their security teams. You know, some may not have a security team and just start implementing DevSecOps. That's better than nothing, right? It's when you start growing, there's these growing pains that are associated with it.
Absolutely. And it sounds really quite, that there seems to be a bit of a sort of haze or gray area in some elements of it, which sounds like what you're trying to remove some of those obstacles. And Sonya, I can only imagine that that's something that's almost part of your own responsibility and role of just inherently like trying to break down these barriers and trying to make everything more cohesive. But Sonya, I'm going to throw this to you. I mean, do you not feel like now the concept of like, I'm not saying the DevSecOps is old news, but it's more of a case of do you see something happening? Like what's coming? Where is it evolving? Like, and how do you manage that while you're still trying to implement a culture of DevSecOps or secure development as part of your development process?
Well, I think we probably need to, as you said, need to understand the different challenge that we have presently to see what could be improved. So I see it for like several challenges that we're having at the moment with some of the security tool chain that we have. The first one is we do have a lot of security testing techniques. So should it be SAST, SCA, DAST, IS, RAPS? There's a lot of tools on that. We don't have one solution that actually fits and would be easier to cover that. Also, we have some fragmentations with those tools. So as I said, we have many solutions, which leads to different dashboards, different platforms. We don't have one unified thing. And what we're trying to do, as also you've mentioned, DJ, is that we try to aggregate everything on the pull requests if we can. But that also leads to another challenge that we have. Some of the security tools don't have native integration, for example, with GitHub, funnily enough, or GitLab, or other tools that we're using on the CI/CD pipeline that we're considering as baseline, but some of the tools don't have those integrations. Also, as you mentioned, the feedback time, some of the tools are taking forever. And because we're in the agile methodology and workflow, we can't afford to wait a scan to run for 8 hours, for example. We just need to check the delta in the pull requests and to have those quick releases and cycle. So from all of these challenges, I would say if a tool can, if a tool can actually aggregate the SAST, the SCA, the DAST, all of those in one platform, one dashboard, and aggregate those results in one place that we could consider as the source of truth. So should it be the pull request or another place? But that place should be near the developers. That could be one starting point. And also to have security tools that are developed for developers, not for security engineers, because most of the time the tools are designed for security engineers in the sense that they provide a lot of information and they flag all the vulnerabilities with the security jargon that developers are not familiar with, and they usually don't have time to process and to triage all of that. So what happens is usually the output is just put on the side and they don't fix anything. So yeah, having that simplicity in the tools on the outputs, just let's kill the reports. Let's do something a little bit simplified. I would say.
You know, when you talk about the tooling, and feedback, so DevOps, flow feedback, and experimentation, right? Most interrupt flow, and even when you think about this, you check something in, if it's right in front of the developers, that's where you really want it to be. And the tools that don't support that integration are the ones that I don't even want to talk to you, right? Because there's a developer persona and then there's the security persona. So even like IDEs, like having like a user or a developer have access to a security IDE, they will go into it 0 times. They're just like, okay, that's something else. I got the security thing. It's in the pull request. I can address it here, rather than start going into these other tool sets. And especially like you hit it right on the nail, Sonya, which is like having that one tool that sort of consolidates a lot of these security concerns. Infrastructure as code, software composition analysis, code scanning and SAST and those kind of things, and dynamic analysis, like what, there's the risk is there, but there's more risk to your supply chain, right? But then security teams, they're the ones that are going to look through that big list and log into that interface for this from the security side and look at the compliance levels and the risk levels and prioritizations and that kind of thing. So and the other thing about this is, I'm going to come back to this whole segmentation thing. Security is the people that security vendors will sell to, but the developers are the ones that are going to be the consumers of it. So I don't know, that's a challenge. Like, if I was, selling software, who would I target? I'd probably target both and have them both come together. But there's another silo type of issue that you have to deal with, is like, who's going to actually purchase and acquire this software, right?
So do you see that as like the sort of main friction point of the fact that we're creating, like, there's tools that are being sold to security teams, but they are trying to be adopted and used by developers, but they may not necessarily be able to get to grips with them or adopt them or actually use the damn things. So, like, is that the main friction point, do you see? Or is it still sort of a cultural element of, like, developers feeling like they've just got so much on as it is, and adding security into it, which could be potentially like we had a talk earlier of, like, where someone could be a breaker, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, is that added pressure? So is it like a tool thing, cultural thing? What do you think it is that's still causing that friction?
I think it's just, accountability, responsibility, and ownership, like who owns it. I think it's almost like the border between Germany and Poland, which is like, never been solidified, not contested at all, right? So, there's I think there's a number of different elements. I think it all boils down to culture, but I think it's just maybe growing pains, and people trying to sort things out. Because, like, again, like if I look at an SRE role, I want to know about an outage before any user calls in, and I want to hopefully be able to fix it and address it so that everyone doesn't even know that there was an issue behind the scenes, right? I want to do the same with security, where, like, we just secure the software and the developers don't even know that they're securing software, right? So instead of calling something a security vulnerability in our artifact or like Jira's or whatever our issue tracking tools, just call it task, right? Everything is just a work item. And again, it comes back to simplification and essentials. And, like, is it essential to have the developer disconnect and get out of their environment? No, it's essential for them to fix things as soon as possible. And that's that whole shifting left thing, right? Where the feedback comes quickly, and the person who checks in the code that has a security issue or, even a functional breakage fixes it and puts it back in. So, to answer your question about it, I think there's the acquisition of software, there's management of software, there's the utilization of software. And I think all of these combined can either, accelerate a bad culture and make it worse, or it can, make it a better culture and a culture of security, which is really what the business needs in the long run, right?
And it's interesting that you say the long run, and it's actually a question that we've got in the chat, and something that I was going to ask you as well from Magno, which is, where do you see DevSecOps going forward? Say in 5 to 10 years time, any predictions? Sonya, do you want to take a stab at this first?
Sure. Yeah, I would say probably having more automation built into the tools and the pipeline. That would be probably one of the outputs going forwards. Also, probably having tools based more on AI or machine learning, just to help us supporting that piece. And if we go further, probably moving from DevSecOps to NoOps, where everything is automated, but this is probably more than 10 years. I don't know your take on it, DJ. What do you think?
I think it's just going to be called development and programming in 5 to 10 years. Like, think about this. 20 years ago, we didn't have all these different organizations. We just call them developers, right? Programmers. And we were responsible for everything, like full stack developers, right? I don't know if anyone remembers that term, but full stack is also, security in there too. What I've noticed lately is when we start looking more into infrastructure as code, the responsibilities of DevOps and DevSecOps expands. It's beyond just software development now, and now it's infrastructure development. It's and that actually extends to the physical world as well. So, for example, zero-touch deployment to Fortinet devices, things that sit in the clinics, right? And they're plugged in, and you trip over a wire, and the clinic goes down. But how do you centralize the config in having DevOps create an automation workflow? Their cloud environment is creating the deployment servers, and then that configuration, one of these Fortinet sparks up, connects to the cloud, pulls down its configuration, you're good to go. So now you've centralized infrastructure. So we're starting to do that now, but we're also trying to figure out, like, how can we automate other things and codify that and then apply DevOps principles to it. So I think we're going to start seeing more compliance checks as well. So are you allowing any on your firewall, right? Or something like that in the physical world. And are you encrypting your buckets? So all these like security checks to harden your environment, I think are just going to become commonplace in all these tools.
So that's not the first time I've heard the term like sort of system hardening as where the future of development is going to. Like that's what you're effectively saying, DJ, is that this should all just become part and parcel. Like all that we're talking about here in terms of like security practices, all of this and like fixing things, it should just be tasks. It should be simplified. And I guess that is a really quite lovely place to be. It's a very sort of idyllic sort of place. And the same with what you were saying, Sonya, of like a no-ops future, like everything's automated, like you don't have to worry about it. But we must have a lot of people on this panel, like listening to this panel, who may not even be in that position just yet, like where they're still trying to shift further left, still trying to get to DevSecOps, or even a bit further than that, where they've established some sort of mentality and culture over there. Like it would be really valuable to hear sort of your tips, like just some insights in terms of like how you got to the place where you're thinking beyond DevSecOps. Like what were the key milestones that you had to hit to get there? DJ, you first.
Well, number one thing, I participated in a report a while back talking about the software supply chain. And we found a statistic saying that 85% to 97%, based on if it's like code or if it's web and frameworks like Node or Bootstrap, whatever, React. On the high side, it's 85 to 97% of the code you have or you create is not even written by your organization. Right. So the 15 to 3% is actually people cobbling it together. So, what would you implement first? Right. So the supply chain is the huge problem there if it's the open source components you're using. So understanding what components you use, simplifying it and saying, hey, we use these components in 15 versions, like get on the same common version of known good software. I think that's going to help you with that 85 to 97%. And then look at other tools like static analysis and that kind of thing. These are necessary tools from a compliance perspective, but even from compliance, like it's SAST and DAST. It's like, why isn't it your supply chain? And then the other thing that we started doing is every single vendor that we engage with, doesn't matter who it is, we do a security review. Part of that review is give us your SBOM and SPDX format, period. And if you don't, guess what? We'll go to another vendor. So this is what we're trying to enforce on the security side. It's a good way to get started and then start attacking the other tools like static analysis second, infrastructure as code as well, like, policy as code, these kind of things. Those are the building blocks. But again, identify the risk, where your organizational risk is, and then address those things first and, get the appropriate tools in place, keep it in front of the engineers, roll it out slowly, and just get used to the fact that security is just part of everything we do.
That's really, yeah, that makes sense, of course. And Sonya, what more to that?
No, funnily enough, that's exactly what we've been doing also at Photobox. Copy paste. We've been doing a gap analysis on the areas that we needed to focus at first. So obviously you're addressing the third parties and dependencies because a big part of the code that we're using is coming from open source projects. We've been also pushing around credential scanners, this kind of things at first, and then we've been moving to other tools to add to that pipeline. And as I mentioned earlier, by onboarding also the developers from the start, so they have a better understanding of what we're implementing and why we're implementing and how we could support the business as well, because it's also important to link it to the business case and where we're doing this. So yeah, having that onboarding journey with the developers is also important. Yeah.
I got one more thing that it just triggered when Sonya was talking is don't block right off the bat. Like put the thing in and observe for like 90 days. Give the developers like time to maybe burn down some technical debt and security debt. You know, because one change of a component could take away like 50% of the vulnerabilities that you're detecting, right? And if you start blocking things right away, you're just going to make everybody extremely mad. And also realize that we develop software for our businesses, right? So for our customers or products, and you're going to find that there might be some things you can't fix. So you need a compensating control around. So there's things that, you know, you're going to have exceptions to the rule, right? So if you turn on blocking right away, you're just going to, you know, you might not deploy it, right? It interrupts the flow. And at the end of the day, the business accepts the security risk. So they might just accept it and say, hey, I know this software is going out bad, but as developers, we just have to, well, the responsibility is on our CISOs and our CTOs and CEOs at that point, right? But again, call it out, get the risk acceptance, document it, and then, you know, you got to push the software out.
That's a lot to chew on. That is a lot to chew on from both of you. We are coming close to time. But I want to finish this panel. And thank you so much for your time, by the way, both of you. I would love just one bit of advice from each of you on, for everyone currently watching this, as to how either themselves, their teams, or their organizations can best prepare for the evolution of security, like whatever the future may look like, whether it is sort of having that system hardening way of life, or whether it is like no ops or a combination of the two. How can, because organizations struggle to pivot at the best of times and be able to adapt quickly enough. So what advice do you have, like your top piece of advice?
Sonya, I'll let you go first on that one.
Oh my gosh, it's a tough one.
Sorry about that.
I would say be curious and be open-minded, just to see that landscape of tools that are on the market, and trying to pick the one that fits your business purpose. It's also easy to implement within your organization. But yeah, I would say just the most important thing would be to have that security culture ingrained in your company. So having also that piece of education is also important.
So I'll give an analogy. I'm from Canada, and there's something called polar bearing, where people get out onto a frozen lake, they'll cut a hole into it, and they'll jump in with their bathing suits on. And then they come out, and, you know, it's like -30 or whatever, right? Wind chill -50. The fear of doing that is greater, or the exhilaration of actually doing it is greater than the fear. So jump into security. You know, it's going to be here. It's coming. If you haven't done it already, you're putting your whole organization at risk. You're putting your customers at risk, their information, you know, and sometimes their personal health information if you're in the medical, you know, in the healthcare industry. So jump in. It's when you get in there, it's just going to be, you're going to come out and you'll be like, yeah, it's like going down a double diamond ski run. You know, you're going to do it again after you try the first time.
I mean, I'm never going to go near like a body of water knit with you. I feel like that sounds terrifying. I mean, I totally resonate with both of you on that. I mean, so my analogy is always the way that I've approached salad in the last year. I hated salad, and then I had to start eating it with every single meal, and now just sort of it's part of my life. Like it is just a done thing. Like it's something that I have to embrace because it's a good thing for me, and I feel like that's like my organization is a threat otherwise. Anyway, just to circle back around, this has been absolutely amazing. I have so many more questions, and I'm sorry if it went sort of this, that, and the other. I just wanted to try and be cognizant of the audience because your experiences are absolutely outstanding. But hey, thank you both so much for all of your help. And folks currently in the session who are viewing it, if you've got any questions, if you want to reach out to Sonya or DJ, please do drop a message and hop in. Do feel free to grab them on Twitter as well. They're also on various things like GitHub and everything too. There's 1,000,001 ways to reach these two people. And they are a wealth of experience and wisdom. So please do reach out. But thank you both again for coming and indulging my wayward questions.
Yeah, no worries, Waleed. Thank you for having us and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.